My son stood up before anyone had finished chewing. The room quieted out of habit, not respect. Ethan Hale had that effect on people: calm voice, steady posture. The kind of man others expected to hear from. I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap. Already uneasy. "I just want to say something," he said, lifting his glass slightly. "Because family matters. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Chains Channel team, based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative." Across the table, Maribel Hale. My daughter-in-law smiled without looking at me. Her parents did the same. I had learned to recognize that smile. It meant I was about to be discussed. "Not included. I'm proud of my mother-in-law," Ethan continued. There was a murmur of approval. Someone nodded. Someone else chuckled. Then he paused. Except one. He didn't gesture. He didn't scan the table. He looked straight at me. The laughter came fast, comfortable, relieved, the kind that assumes the target deserves it. I felt heat rise into my face. Not from embarrassment at first, but from shock. I was Rowena Hale. I was 68 years old. I had raised that man after his father died. I had paid his tuition, co-signed his first apartment, sat through nights he thought he had ruined his life. And now every person at that table believed I had done something unforgivable. Charles Whitmore cleared his throat, amused. "Well," he said, "honesty is refreshing." I opened my mouth, then closed it. No one was waiting to hear me. Ethan set his glass down. His voice changed, not louder, just sharper. "Since we're already being honest," he said, "we should talk about what you've been hiding." He reached under his chair and pulled out a thin folder. Cardboard. Labeled. He held it in both hands. As if the weight mattered. I felt the room lean forward. Not toward me, toward judgment. I did not cry. I did not stand. I watched my son open the folder, and I understood something then with perfect clarity. This dinner had been planned, and whatever was inside that folder was about to decide who I was allowed to be from now on. It wasn't everyone who laughed. I noticed that first. Diane Whitmore laughed too quickly, like she wanted to prove she was relaxed. Charles Whitmore laughed louder than anyone. A single bark that carried authority. Two of Maribel's cousins laughed because Charles did. One of Ethan's friends laughed late. After checking the room, a few people didn't laugh at all. They stared at their plates as if silverware suddenly required full concentration. Maribel said nothing. She didn't reach for my hand. She didn't look at Ethan. She lifted her glass and took a small sip, eyes fixed on the table, as if silence were a neutral position. I had once believed that about her. Charles leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said lightly, "if we're airing things out, it's probably overdue." Ethan didn't respond. He was watching me, measuring something. The folder stayed closed on the table between us, untouched but present. Like a verdict waiting to be read, I felt the urge to explain rise in my chest, fast and panicked. To say I had never taken what wasn't mine. To say I had only tried to help. To say I didn't deserve this. But explanations require an audience willing to listen. This room had already decided what role I was playing. "So," Charles added, tilting his head, "are you going to say something?" Rowena Maribel's fork paused midair. Not to stop him. To listen. I shook my head once. Slow, deliberate. "No," I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded steady. "You seem to have this handled." Ethan's jaw tightened. The smallest shift. He slid the folder closer to himself, aligning it with the edge of the table. "We do," he said. That was when it settled in, not as fear, but as clarity. The timing, the confidence. The way no one asked what the folder contained before laughing at me. This wasn't a misunderstanding that had gotten out of hand. It was a moment they had rehearsed. And the worst part was not that they thought I was guilty. It was that they were comfortable believing it. Together, out loud. With me still sitting there, it hadn't started at that table. It never does. It started years earlier. Quietly, with decisions made without me and explanations offered afterward, as if that were the same thing. We already talked it through. Maribel would say, "We didn't want to bother you." I learned what that meant. I learned to nod. When Ethan and Maribel moved houses, I heard about it after the offer was accepted. When they changed banks, I found out when a statement stopped arriving at my address. I asked once, carefully, "Why didn't you mention it?" Ethan answered for her. It just slipped our minds. "Mom," Charles called it efficiency. "Too many voices slow things down," he said one afternoon, smiling as if he were giving advice. "You understand." I did understand, or I told myself I did, at some point. The language changed. Concern became interference. Questions became control. Maribel laughed once, not unkindly, and said, "You worry like someone who wants a vote." Ethan didn't laugh, but he didn't stop her either. "I'm only trying to help," I said. "I know," he replied. "But sometimes help feels like pressure." So I stepped back. Then further, I told myself I was being generous. I told myself this was how marriages survived. I told myself silence was a gift I was giving my son. Charles took advantage of that silence. "Rowena means well," he would say, glancing around the room, "but she doesn't always see the big picture." No one asked what picture he meant. No one needed to. The label did the work, once. Maribel said it outright. "You can be difficult." She told me, not angry, just factual. "You want reassurance." That's exhausting. I apologized. I shouldn't have. But I did. By the time I realized what my quiet had taught them, it was already established. I was the woman whose feelings could be managed later. The woman whose presence required patience. The woman whose endurance had been mistaken for consent. And sitting there at that table, with the folder waiting to be opened, I understood something else too. They hadn't learned to ignore me by accident. They had learned it because I had made it easy. Ethan's father died when Ethan was 12. One day, there was a man in the house who whistled while he shaved. And the next, there was a folded flag and a casserole rotation. Ethan slept on my side of the bed for weeks, his back pressed to my arm, as if distance might take me too. I learned how to be steady because he needed something solid to lean on. "I'll be okay, Mom," he used to say, voice too calm for his age. "You don't have to worry so much." I worried anyway. I worried through middle school concerts and late-night college calls. I worried when he changed majors twice, and when his first serious girlfriend left without explanation. When he married Maribel, I told myself worry had finally done its job. At first, nothing felt wrong. He called every Sunday. He asked my opinion. Even when he didn't take it. "We're thinking of waiting," he'd say, or "We're leaning toward something smaller." The words mattered. They meant he still saw me. Then the calls shortened. The questions stopped. When I offered advice, he sighed before answering, as if bracing. "Maribel and I have it covered," he said once, not unkindly. Final. I asked him directly one afternoon, standing in his kitchen while he pretended to read an email, "Did I do something I said? Because it feels like I did." He didn't look up. "You didn't do anything," he said. "You just react strongly. It puts us in a position." "What position?" I asked. He exhaled. "Having to manage you." The word stayed with me. Manage. As if I were a problem to be handled, not a person to be heard. Now he stood at the end of the table, shoulders squared, folder between his hands. The boy who used to bring me dandelions had learned how to align his papers with a table edge, how to keep his voice level while the room judged me. I watched him carefully, the tight jaw, the way he avoided meeting my eyes for a second too long. Something in him was braced, not confident. I wondered when that happened. I wondered who had named me the risk. Ethan cleared his throat. "I want everyone to listen," he said. And in that moment, I understood the hardest truth of all, whether he believed what he was about to show or had been taught to. The distance between us had already been rehearsed. Ethan opened the folder without ceremony. He didn't look at me when he did it. He laid the first page flat on the table, smoothing the edge with his palm as if precision could make what followed cleaner. "This is a copy," he said, "from last spring." The paper was familiar before I recognized it. A bank statement. My name printed at the top, numbers neatly aligned. Withdrawals circled in blue ink. Charles leaned forward. "That's the account you insisted on managing, isn't it?" "I never insisted," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "It was set up when Ethan was in college." Ethan didn't correct either of us. He turned the page. Another statement, then a third, dates highlighted, amounts underlined, separate actions stitched together into something that looked deliberate. "You moved money," Maribel said quietly, not accusing, confirming. "I transferred funds between accounts," I said. "For taxes, for repairs. You knew that." She pressed her lips together. "We knew you had access." Charles smiled, thin and patient. "Access becomes opportunity," he said, "especially when no one is watching." Ethan slid a document toward the center. "This is an authorization form," he said. "Your signature is here." I leaned forward despite myself. "That's not an authorization," I said. "That's a temporary permission. It expired." He didn't argue. He simply let the paper sit there. The room filled in the rest. Diane Whitmore murmured something about boundaries. One of the cousins whispered, "I always wondered." Someone else nodded. Ethan turned another page. An email, printed and highlighted, my words stripped of context. The reply below missing entirely. "You were warned," Charles said. "Multiple times." "No." I said, "I was asked to help." Ethan's eyes flicked up just once. There was something in them then hesitation. Maybe, but it passed. He tapped the folder. "These are the facts as they were presented to me." The phrase landed hard. As they were presented. The room had shifted. Chairs angled inward. Bodies leaned closer. The story had found its shape, and I was already inside it. Ethan closed the folder halfway, as if saving something. "There's more," he said. "But before we continue, I want everyone to understand why this matters." I sat back, my hands flat on the table, feeling the weight of what had just been arranged. They weren't waiting to hear my explanation. They were waiting for the next page. Ethan didn't open the folder wider. He turned it, rotated it so the next section faced the table instead of me. "These are internal drafts," he said. "They were never sent. They weren't meant to be." Charles straightened. "Drafts prove nothing." Ethan slid the first page forward. An email thread. Incomplete by design until it wasn't. Subject lines stacked like steps. Names repeated. Dates aligned. Maribel inhaled sharply. Not loud. Not dramatic. "Enough. Read the attachments," Ethan said, still calm. "The ones marked contingency." I recognized Charles's phrasing immediately. Efficient. Confident. If she resists, when we move forward, after the authority is reassigned, words written as if my compliance were a scheduling issue. "That's not what it looks like," Charles said, too quickly. Ethan turned another page. A draft letter addressed to a law office in Back Bay. My name typed correctly. My address current. A proposal to consolidate accounts under temporary guardianship due to concerns about judgment. Diane's voice wavered. That's a precaution. No, Ethan said. It's a maneuver. He laid out the next document, a timeline, bullet points. Transfers planned, not executed. Conditions noted. One line circled twice present as family concern to avoid dispute. Maribel reached for the paper, then stopped herself. You said this was about protecting us. I said it was about clarity. Ethan replied. You said she wouldn't notice. I felt the room go still. Not tense. Empty. Confidence drained out of it like air from a punctured seal. Charles tried to laugh. It didn't land. This is being exaggerated. Ethan shook his head. This was coordinated. You discussed strategy. You anticipated resistance. You counted on her silence. He finally looked at me then. Not apologetic, resolute. I didn't bring this out to defend her, he said. I brought it out to stop you. No one spoke. No one reached for a glass. The story they had practiced had lost its footing. The folder remained open, its second half visible, undeniable, and waiting. Maribel did not look at me. She didn't look at Ethan either. Her eyes stayed on the folder, on the neat lines of ink that had just stripped the room of its confidence. When she finally spoke, her voice was controlled, almost careful. You're presenting this like it was malicious. She said, It wasn't. Charles nodded quickly, grateful. It was practical. Maribel continued. Someone had to think ahead. You weren't doing that. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Recognition. Thinking ahead for whom Ethan asked. For us, she said. For stability. For the future. She gestured vaguely, as if the word could carry weight without detail. Your mother has patterns. She reacts emotionally. We needed a plan in case things became complicated. I laughed once. I couldn't stop it. Complicated. I repeated. You mean inconvenient. Maribel's jaw tightened. You see, this is exactly what I mean. Ethan turned to her fully now. You mean speaking? She exhaled. You're taking this personally. I am a person, I said. She finally met my eyes. There was no shame there, only assessment. I tried to include you, she said, but you always needed reassurance. You wanted to be consulted. That's exhausting. Charles leaned in. No one is saying you're a bad person, Rowena, just that you shouldn't be in control. The word landed cleanly. Control, not concern, not protection. So you decided for me, I said, quietly. Maribel folded her hands. We decided what was necessary. Ethan's voice dropped. Without telling her. You would have told her, Maribel said, and then she would have resisted. This avoided conflict. I looked at my son and saw it land. The realization, not just of what they planned, but of how easily they justified it. Maribel straightened. I didn't think you'd take it this way. She said to me, I didn't think you meant to. I replied, but you did. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny it. She waited, as if the explanation should be enough. In that pause, I understood the truth with a clarity that hurt more than the accusation ever had. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, and it had been made long before tonight. I waited until the room stopped searching for an explanation that would save them. Then I spoke. I'm not going to argue the paperwork, I said. My voice carried without effort. You've already shown it. And you've already explained it. Charles opened his mouth. I raised my hand, not high, just enough. He stopped. I won't argue motives either. I continued. You've named those two, practical, necessary, efficient. I let the words sit between us, unchanged. I understand exactly what you planned. Maribel shifted. Rowena, I'm speaking now. I said, not sharp, final. I turned to Ethan. You don't need to defend me, I said, and you don't need to punish anyone on my behalf. That isn't why I'm here. He looked at me then, really looked. The tension in his shoulders eased a fraction, like something heavy had been set down. What I am going to do, I said, is end this conversation as it exists. I placed my palm on the table, beside the folder. You decided I was a risk without asking me. You tried to remove my authority quietly. You relied on my silence to make it easier. Charles scoffed. Authority is earned. So is trust. I said. You lost both. Maribel inhaled to respond. I shook my head. No more reframing. No more explanations. I'm not asking for apologies. And I'm not offering forgiveness tonight. Ethan swallowed. Mom, he said softly. I met his eyes. You were invited into this, I said. Not as a son, as leverage. I didn't accuse him. I didn't need to. You stepped back before it went where they wanted it to go. That matters. His jaw tightened. He nodded once. I will not be managed, I said. I will not be discussed as a contingency, and I will not be present where my dignity is negotiable. No one interrupted. The room felt smaller, not because of anger, but because the rules had changed. I leaned back, hands folded again. We're finished here. Ethan closed the folder, not gently, decisively, and for the first time that night, the silence wasn't waiting to swallow me. It was waiting for what came next. Ethan opened the folder again, this time without hesitation. There's one more document, he said. The one this was all leading to. Charles laughed. Brittle. You've made your point. Ethan didn't look at him. He slid the final page forward. This was filed last week. I recognized the letterhead immediately. The law firm I had retained months earlier. Quietly. After a conversation that left me uneasy, I hadn't told anyone then. I hadn't needed permission to protect myself. Maribel leaned in. Her face changed as she read. Not confusion. Calculation. Failing. What is this? Diane asked. A reassignment, Ethan said. Of authority. Charles stood. You can't do that. I already did, I said. The words felt precise, almost gentle. Any discretionary access tied to my accounts has been revoked. The advisory role you assumed no longer exists. That's temporary. Charles said, it can be challenged. It isn't, Ethan replied. The structure was updated. The trusts were consolidated under an independent administrator, no family proxy, no emergency clause. Maribel looked at me then. Finally, you planned this. I prepared. I said, there's a difference. Charles reached for the paper as if he could pull it back into a different outcome. Ethan placed his hand over it. Not forceful, just final. The changes are effective immediately. Silence fell hard. Not stunned silence. Accounting silence. The kind people enter when they realize the numbers no longer work in their favor. You used us, Maribel said. No, I replied. I stopped you. Charles's voice dropped. After everything we've done for this family, I stood. Not to argue, to end it. Dinner is over, I said. So is the arrangement you thought you had. Ethan closed the folder and stood with me. Chairs scraped. Someone muttered an apology that wasn't meant for me. Coats were reached for. The table emptied unevenly, quickly, as if the room itself wanted distance from what had just been decided. At the door, Charles said my name once. I didn't turn. By the time the door closed behind us, the house was quiet again. The kind of quiet that arrives after control changes hands. Months passed without contact. No calls. No invitations. No attempts at repair disguised as concern. I heard about them anyway. People talk when a story loses its ending. They filled the silence with rumors instead. I was told Charles said I had planned it for years, that I humiliated them out of spite, that I was unstable, vindictive, impossible. Maribel told friends I had manipulated my own son, that Ethan had been confused, pressured, led. I didn't correct a single version. Ethan came by one afternoon with coffee and an apology he didn't rehearse. I should have seen it sooner, he said. I should have stopped it before it reached you. You stopped it when it mattered. I told him. That counts. He nodded. They're angry. I know, I said, anger is easier than accountability. The legal changes held. Quietly, permanently. The administrator did exactly what administrators do. No favors, no phone calls returned out of obligation. The authority Charles assumed he had simply ended. There was nothing dramatic about it, which made it worse for him. I learned something watching it unfold. Cruelty is loud because it needs witnesses. Clarity doesn't. It only needs follow-through. One evening, Maribel sent a message. Not an apology, a statement. You didn't have to do it that way. I read it once and deleted it. The truth was, I had done it the only way that would last. I didn't take revenge. I took access. I took leverage. I took the reward they believed patience would eventually earn them. I took my name out of their mouths and my future out of their hands. Here's the life lesson no one teaches you until it costs you something. Being kind does not require being available for harm. Silence is not peace if it protects someone else's power over you. And dignity doesn't come from enduring what hurts you. It comes from deciding when you are done. I sleep well now, not because I won, but because I stopped participating. If this story resonated with you, like the video, leave a comment. Or subscribe. Someone else listening might need permission to draw their own line. If you had the chance to take back control without becoming cruel, would you do it?